Good morning, everyone. Welcome in. We'll give everyone a few moments to get settled. All right, good morning. I guess it's really afternoon. It's 12 o'clock, so welcome. Happy Women's History Month. Here, we're very excited to celebrate with you all. We have an awesome panel in store for you guys today. My name is Brianna Duncan. I'm one of the co-chairs for the webinars committee with SACAC, and I'll be introducing our moderator, Ms. Kelly Savoy. She will be helping with moderating the questions today. Also, my co-chair Jade is working in the background. So feel free to drop any comments or questions in the chat. We'll be moderating that throughout the presentation. We'll be on for about an hour or so, just be cognizant of time, and then I'll hand it over to Kelly.
Wonderful, thank you. Hello, everybody. I am Kelly Savoy, and I am one of the committee members on the SACAC webinar committee. And so I am appreciative to be here today and appreciative to all of our panelists for joining us and sharing their journey with us. If I can, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to introduce themselves. And as you do, if you can just state your name, the institution or organization that you're with, what your role is, how long you've been in that field, and share with us a woman you admire or look up to. So having said that, Pamela Bowie.
Good morning here in Central Standard Time. Good afternoon to everyone that's on East Coast time. My name is Pamela Bowie. I'm with Arkansas State University. It's in Jonesboro, Arkansas, in the northeast corner of the state. So think an hour northwest of Memphis, 2 hours northeast of Little Rock, and you'll find Jonesboro. I'm the Senior Director of Admissions. I've been in that role since August of 2019. A-State is my third institution. I've worked for UA Little Rock and UA Pulaski Technical College, which is a 2-year institution in Central Arkansas. So all in all, about 14 years in admissions. And I greatly admire and look up to both of my grandmothers. I spent a lot of time with them over the summer. You know, mom and dad still had to work, so kids got shipped off to the grandparents' houses, and both of those women worked in education. They were both school teachers, and they both had 5+ children, and they had husbands, and they were on the usher board at church, and they just, you know, did all these awesome things, even, you know, at their ages, and were able to balance, you know, kind of it all, and still be a good influence in all of their grandchildren's lives.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think you have a fan following you out in our chat box there. So thank you. Aimee Khan Foss. Welcome.
Hello, hello. Hi, I'm Aimee. I am the Director of Admission at Agnes Scott College, small women's college, about 1,000 students, small liberal arts women's college in Decatur, Georgia, which is very much in Atlanta. I am an Agnes Scott graduate. So I graduated in 2008, and I've worked in the admission office pretty much since that time. So I think at this point, it seems it's rare to see someone that has stayed at one institution for a long time, but that has been my journey at Agnes Scott. I've been in the director role for about 4 years now, and started as an intern my senior year of college. As far as a woman who I look up to, and someone that I'm sending a lot of good vibes to today is our state representative, B. Nguyen, who represents part of Atlanta and is an Asian American, and just sort of an incredible woman and voice to be hearing today. So thinking about Atlanta and the women that we lost this week.
Wonderful, thank you. And next up we have Zara Mccoy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Zaire Mccoy. I serve as an Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management and Dean of Admission at Rollins College here in beautiful Winter Park, Florida, where the temperature today is slightly warm. I won't offer any warmer weather or more specific details to not make anyone jealous if you're not experiencing warm weather right now, but it is delightful this time of year. But anyway, so I have been at Rollins. This is going my 4th year in this particular role. I have served previously at my alma mater, which is Elon University, for 15 years. And similar to Aimee, worked as an intern my senior year and found this career path that wasn't, right, something that I was thinking about, but here we are. And so it's been a total of 19 years in enrollment. So excited to be with you. A woman that I look up to, she is no longer with us here on earth, but I'm wearing a necklace kind of in honor of her, is one of my aunts. And she's also one of my godmothers. And she was a lawyer. She was a bad Wonder Woman, and someone who always wanted me to be a lawyer. So here we are, right, in enrollment. That's cool. I know she's proud of me for doing this work too, but just honored to be able to look up to professional working women and know that you can balance family and career and life. And so it doesn't always have to be easy, but she showed that it was always worth it. So I'll leave it there.
Wonderful, thank you. And Tonya Perry.
Well, good morning, everybody. Greetings from also Central Standard Time, Pam. So good to see everybody, and thank you to this organization for inviting me. So I'm the executive director for Gear Up Alabama. I am coming to this profession. I was a middle school, high school teacher, and then I moved to the university and started teaching teachers. And then 4 years ago, an opportunity came about for me to work with students in college access. And so I'm excited about being here because I'm from a very rural town in North Carolina. And the opportunities that can come from college access information and being able to have a group of people who can undergird you and help you get to college is so important. So that's the kind of work that I do. So I'm kind of the bridge between high school and college. Even though I work as a professor at the university, college access work is very important to me. Somebody that I admire. So all of you talked about some really good women. So I'm just going to take them all. How about that? I'm going to take all of my mom and my aunts, who were really women who poured into me, into the other children. I think I have 21 first cousins, and they all poured into each one of us and thought that we were special in every way. And it didn't matter what our faults were. They still highlighted and uplifted us. And then I got to give a shout out to my representative, Terry Sewell, who represents the Black Belt of Alabama, which is the area that I serve, with 10,000 children between 12th grade and going into college, into the workforce and military. She is a supporter of this grant and a champion for children who are brilliant and magnificent and just need some support to get to different places to be successful. So a shout out to our representative, Terry Sewell, shout out to my mom, and a shout out to all my aunts. With all those cousins, they still made us all feel special. So thanks for having me here today.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to go ahead. First question that we have is, was this profession, this leadership position, always within your plans? And kind of a second part of that is, how do you begin to map out your leadership journey within your profession? And I'm going to go ahead and kick that over. I think you somewhat answered some part of this within your introductions, but if I can go ahead and start this with Zaire, that would be wonderful.
So when I started at my alma mater, I worked in my first year seminar, my facilitator happened to have worked in admission. So that was like my first introduction to the profession and the work that was happening. And I worked as like a telecounselor. So I got to call the students who were admitted or let them know at the time that we were coming to visit in person. And so that part of the work seemed really influential, but not enough to know that this was like a career path that could have been something worth doing and of interest at the time. And so my senior year, when I took advantage and applied for an internship experience and had it, I thought, this is interesting. I don't know what long-term professional experience this could be, but I knew that in the interim that it was something that was exciting to be able to represent my institution, my alma mater, to prospective students wherever they were going to send me. And in fact, I didn't get the role that I applied for initially. And so then it was like, well, what am I going to do? And an opportunity presented itself to work for my institution a little bit later. When I think about leadership journey, I honestly came in as an eager admission counselor, just ready to take on and learn whatever I could, however I could, as often as I could. And so volunteering often within the office was just a role that I wanted to take part in, not because I felt like that's what I needed to do as much as that's what I wanted to do. I was willing to do whatever. And I know there's some other questions I'm sure about work-life balance to come, but it was an exciting time. After having spent 15 years at my alma mater, I had applied for a position comparable to the one I'm in now here at Rollins and didn't get it. And for me, there was a sense of relief because I knew for my own personal journey, I needed to apply to know that I wasn't going to regret not applying. And I wasn't so sure that I wanted to be in this particular capacity. Maybe some of you would disagree, but the work that we do is centered around making sure that students get to go where they believe they can thrive, or opening up opportunities for them to see where they can thrive. And so being in a leadership position like this oftentimes feels disconnected from that direct work, but we know that at this level, we have so much influence on policy and ability to admit students who might not look the same on paper, but have the same or more potential to offer to our campus communities. And so my transition here to Rollins was really about identifying a place where I would get to know students in a smaller school environment. So 2,000 students versus 6,000 students. And that has truly been the case. And so wanting to make an effort to present myself or be in an information session or go and greet families as they're arriving to campus, just to be able to connect someone who is in a decision-making role that can still be a real human in this process. And so I don't know what the future holds. I take it honestly one day at a time, but it has been an honor to be at a table and to be a part of making decisions that certainly impact students a lot here in Central Florida, but obviously across the US and the world.
Tonya, would you like to add anything to that?
I sure would, Kelly. And I just have a very similar story in some ways to Zaire. I didn't know that this is where I would end up, right? But I can say to the other women who are on the call and others who are here that no matter what you do, whatever you're going through prepares you for what's next. And you're able to use whatever you've learned before to get where you're planning to go. I started off as an upward bound counselor. So I've been doing college access work for a while. And I was, in another life, but who knew that being an upward bound counselor and being able to work with students and help transition them to college would actually come in helpful to me in my career. But I'm thankful that I had that experience, and it helps me about where I am today. And then being able to work with college students and be able to work with high school students all at the same time has prepared me in some way. I would say that I'm at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I don't think I said that initially, so that meant UAB. And the schools that we serve with the Gear Up Alabama grant, primarily in the Black Belt of Alabama. So we have about 42 schools originally in the grant in high school. So what I do primarily is I work with schools and children and families, and we try to provide resources and undergird them to prepare them to get where they need to go. So we do things like ACT, college readiness, but we also do wellness and social emotional learning and mentoring, those things that we know that students need in order to feel whole and ready to move on to the next part of their lives. So in my role, Kelly, I would just have to say that one, I didn't know this is where I was going to be, but I'm so thankful that I've been able to take every experience to help me be a better person in this position. And that I do, like Zaire was talking about, get a chance to meet with people to help make decisions. I don't get a chance to be with students like I used to when I was a teacher. but I get a chance to help make some decisions and help kids move forward in a way that they can be successful. So I like to say sometimes that I'm the person who helps try to make their dreams come true. What is it that you've prepared for, and how do we get you there? And all the counselors in high school, they do that every day. All the admissions counselors who are in respective college admissions programs, they do that every day. I think we all share just trying to make these dreams come true for these young folks on both the high school end and the college end. So I'm glad to be able to be in that gap situation to help foster that relationship for students and families and their communities. Hope that answered the question, Kelly, because that's what I got.
You're good. You're good. Thank you so much. It's interesting how it all is tying together. So, Aimee, how would you describe your leadership style?
Well, I do want to sort of just mention, like, I appreciate really hearing what Tonya and Zaire had to say, because it makes me feel a little bit better, because I also I didn't necessarily see myself going forward or knowing that leadership was for me in admission. And part of that is because I didn't strongly identify with pieces of it that I felt like were like admission DNA. Like, as an introvert, I really struggled with like travel season and like going into high schools and like not quite knowing what to expect each day. My perfectionism of like wanting to get every presentation perfectly right, and, you know, answer all of the questions. Like, I really felt like there was something in me that was like missing and that how could I possibly lead a team if I sort of couldn't always like feel really confident in those areas. So I would just say, even if you feel like none of us are good at every aspect of this job, none of us are, we are all working on things. We have our individual strengths. So I would just really recommend talking to people about that too. I hope people don't assume that leaders have all of the answers, you know, do every aspect of the job perfectly, because I certainly don't in my role. And I think that's really unrealistic to try to fulfill that. So that sort of goes with what I would say is sort of how I feel like I lead, which is like through humility and trying to really understand that we are full and total people that have sort of, you know, are approaching this from imperfect places, and also like we make mistakes. So I try to bring that. I feel very much sort of like a millennial leader. Like I do sort of associate with the collaborative nature of our work. I think we do things, so my team does things really, really well when we bring in people with very different skill sets, personalities, and you know, perspectives. So the things that excite me the most probably are like building teams, like from our visit team to the people that work really closely on our ambassador programs, helping people take on roles and responsibilities that they're really excited about. So collaborative, humility, those are my big things.
That's wonderful. Good information. Thank you. Pamela, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Aimee, we are the same. I am keenly aware of where my strengths lie, where my weaknesses lie, but I think that kind of lends itself to what you talk about as your leadership style. And I'm very much the same in that way too, very collaborative. I know I don't know everything. I know I'm not perfect. And I know that there is always something that I may be missing. And so being able to look at others on my team and say, okay, what can you bring to the situation, or what can you bring to this project? We'll make sure that this project is successful. And then really empowering other people, even though, you know, it's so weird. I may not be feeling confident, but like, I will be your biggest hype man, right? And say like, oh, you got this. Like, I picked you for a reason because your strengths are this. And I know what it's going to do for this project or for this, you know, particular task. And so you've got this, like, go with it. You know, I'm going to be in the corner, really, you know, cheering you on and helping you to, you know, reach the eventual goal. So, you know, I think sometimes we don't think about some of those things that we call shortcomings as ways to kind of improve how we interact with others and how we work in teams and lead others. But for me, just kind of always having in the back of my mind, what am I missing? What's not working here? Should we be doing something else? That leads me to then trust my team and to go to my team to say, hey, we need to have a brainstorming session. We need to really look at, why we missed, this particular student or this particular situation, and how can we improve and go forward.
Good information. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So think about, can you identify a turning point or kind of an aha moment in your career, and how did that impact your trajectory forward? Who's ready to take that on? Aimee, go for it.
Well, I thought about this and I don't feel like I've had too many aha moments. Like I sort of just, but I realized I did have this moment where, how you realize like my parents did not know anything that at this point I don't know about life. They just like had kids and figured it out, and like the decisions that they make about their own things or things that involve me have much more to do with them than like getting a secret handbook that helped them learn things. I feel the same way about leaders and managers and supervisors. Like there was not a point that switched and like I gained all this new knowledge. I was the person that I was before and stepped into this role, right? And most of us don't have the opportunity to get a ton of training. Like, I don't know, did any of you get management training before you were in management roles? No, it's just not commonly done right now, though I think it probably should be. So, I mean, I would really recommend taking opportunities to try to work on those skills, and also sort of understand that like one day you're not in that position, and then one day sometimes you were thrown into that position before maybe you thought you were ready, or without some of the things you hope to gain. So I would just recommend like working on some of those skills and really paying attention to what you like about the leaders that you see, and the things that you want to do differently.
Kelly, is it okay if we just jump in?
Please do.
I was really thinking about what Aimee was talking about and how we end up in these spaces. And I don't know, it was an aha, but it's kind of like a journey. Imagine yourself in a little car and you got to make a decision. Am I going left or right? Well, I think I'll go right. And then you go to another stop. Well, I'll get ready for this, whatever it is that needs to be done. And then you get to another fork in the road. You go, okay, am I going left or right? I go right. Okay, well, that's a decision I had to make. But at every fork in the road, Kelly, I felt like this was the right turn for me. I can't say it was an aha, but it was like, this feels right. This is the right turn for me. And what do I mean for this feels right? It means this, and I don't want to just, and it's also not just a feeling, it's also decision making about your skills. But I also felt like when I was at that fork, what is it that I wanted to do that can make a difference, that I felt good about, that would help use the skills that I had and would help me also grow? And what would that do? So it wasn't so much an aha as much as a little car on a road going along, and then an opportunity came up, whether I applied for it or someone presented me with it. And then which way did it need to go? So I am a spiritual person, so I do lean on prayer for guidance. And in addition to that, I also look at what my skills are and what this position, where I want to go. And, honestly, Kelly, this is year 31 for me. So I'm really asking my question now, which is, what is a legacy that I want to leave for my work situation, right? What is it that I want to leave behind with the children I work with the students I work with, the communities and families? What is it? So I'm still in my car, making decisions about which way this car is going to go, but really thinking about in the long term, what is it that I want to leave for other people to be able to take forward? And that's really more than an aha. It's been more like, okay, it's me in this little car, just trying to figure out where I'm going in this journey.
So Aimee made me think of this, and I'm going to go off script a little bit. Look out. And Tonya, you furthered this, but I'm going to put this out there. There's not a lot of training for men to take on a leadership role. So is there anything, any book or podcast or resource you feel like you rely on or that was helpful to you that you would suggest others to take on to give you the confidence to put yourself forward for these leadership positions? Does anybody have any resource or that you would suggest?
I don't necessarily have a resource, but this is something I think that we, take for granted. I'm very observant. And so if I'm in a situation, I'm not necessarily the leader in that situation, I will observe how that leader moves in that situation, and then also how others respond to that leader and their leadership style and their leadership decisions. And one that tells you a couple of things. One, obviously about that leader and their leadership style and the culture of the organization, but two, it tells you about those other people in the situation. So then when you see yourself kind of thrown into a position, whether it's because of resignations or reorganizations, maybe something like against, your will, right? Someone comes to you and says, we have this vacancy that needs to be filled, here you go. You kind of have some of that research in the back of your mind to say, okay, I know I'm going into this situation with these particular challenges, and I know how people respond to these types of actions or, being asked to do these tasks or be on these different teams. And so, and Aimee, I think, suggested this, or maybe it was Tonya, but, just looking at leaders that are leading your team, leading other teams, leaders, observing them and seeing, what their leadership style is and how they empower their teams. That will give you a lot of good, kind of do's and don'ts. Sometimes you see leaders who maybe aren't the best leaders, and you can kind of, see some of those things where you say to yourself, I am never going to do that. That's just as helpful as a list of things that, you should do.
I'll jump in to the question. I think, well, one, shout out to all of us who are introverts, because being a trained extrovert is how we get through. So shout out to my people here who are that. I would offer one thing or a couple of things that have been helpful in terms of resources are those personality and work assessments. I know sometimes it feels like we do them in every type of setting. And while it doesn't always work out perfectly, it's always nice to start off a year or a season working towards understanding who you're working with, right? And I tend to be the type of leader who wants to meet people where they are. We can set expectations, we can talk about our plan, we can execute that plan, but not everybody is going to bring that same strength to the table. And so when we expect for everybody to do the same exact thing at the same exact speed and skill set, it just, we come up with a lot of disappointment, which we know we already dish out this time of year for students who are not being offered admission, for those of us on the college side. One of the things that I did at my previous institution, and I tried to do when I first got here at Rollins, is implementing or working with the fish philosophy. And so for those of you that know about that, out of the Seattle fish market, and therefore principles, play, make their day, be there, and choose your attitude. And I feel like it's something that I have to think about every day, right? So it's like, which battle do I fight? Or what can we do, particularly now in COVID, to ensure that the team is being taken care of, knowing that the demands of our work are higher than ever. And they were already high pre-COVID, so now they're higher than ever, if that's possible. I don't know, we need more than 24 hours in the day, which some of my team have figured out how to do. And I don't ask questions, I just try to figure out how do you get that sleep back. But I think in terms of trying to understand where our colleagues are and how to build them up in those areas and finding some level of positivity. Again, we do a lot of great work, but a lot of times our work gets a lot of negative press, as we've seen some things pop up most recently. And I don't think we get reminded enough of how much good work we do. So I think just finding those small moments to enhance that and figuring out ways to acknowledge the strengths that our staff bring.
Thank you. Very insightful. Tonya, did you want to add something to that?
I did, Kelly. There are two things that have helped me. One is an assessment. It's a self-assessment, but it's assessment of my team of me. So that assessment I found very eye-opening, because sometimes how I think I come across may not be exactly how I come across. And so the assessment that they do of me, being able to sit down and go through that was really helpful. Number two, my university offers coaching. And I took them up on that one year, where I had a coach, an executive coach, where when I was getting ready to make a decision, or I was going to have to do things with the team, it was an opportunity to talk through with someone else who was separate from the organization that I was leading, to give me some feedback about how I maneuver, how I make decisions. And I feel like that was really helpful to me. So I know that not everyone has that, but it might be a good investment if you feel like you really want to know how you lead, understand how you make decisions, and then get an objective view about how you kind of navigate. Learned a lot about myself. Honestly, Kelly, I liked a lot of it, but some of it I really need to work on.
That's wonderful. Great resource to have. Thank you for sharing. So you kind of brought us over to our next question. And I think as women, we struggle with this even more so, but what about work-life balance? How do you balance work, home responsibilities, keeping, making sure you're taking care of you? Pamela?
I was just thinking to myself, like, please don't call on me. And I have to just preface my answer with, I am married. I've been married for almost 13 years now. I have two wonderful boys who I refer to as the 7-year-old and the 1.75-year-old. I am a doctoral student. I'm pursuing an EDD in higher education. I have a full-time job as a senior director of admissions. And in my spare time, I'm very active with my alumni organization for my sorority. So I don't, in the traditional, when we think of the work-life balance, when I hear the word balance, I think of a scale and I think of like all things being equal, and that is not my life, right? There are peaks and there are valleys, and there are times when some things take priority over other things. And for me, it's just really been a matter of what is the priority? Why is it the priority, and how is it going to help my family? And I think framing it like that, even when you talk about career, when I made the decision to take this position, I just had a baby, and it required me to move 2 hours away from the city where me and my husband both grew up. So on the outside looking in, you may say that is insane. Why would you do that? But for me, the position, it was very strategic, and I knew I needed to be here in order to get somewhere else. I knew it was a step, and I knew it was something that I had to do, and I had to prove, kind of to myself, and, be able to have that career experience. And so, with my husband's blessing, because we're together on all things, we took that plunge. And so, people, that wouldn't be a very good example probably of work-life balance, but for me at that time, it was something I needed to do. And, I gave it a year, and I said, you know what, for a year, I'm gonna work late, I'm gonna work on the weekend, I'm gonna get everything together. And I gave myself a timeline, and I said, after a year, I have got to the point where I have delegated things to people. I have built a strong team that I know can do things and take over things to where I don't have to have my hands, in everything and be micromanaging. And after a year, I had my team in place, I had my, units, and I was able to relinquish those things. And I would say now, I'm back to more kind of the student thing. I'm staring down a dissertation, right? So like school is kind of the priority right now. But, I still go to basketball games on Saturdays, right? Because my 7-year-old wants to, he's playing league basketball. And so, not thinking about balance as just, it's got to all be equal, right? But just where am I in my life right now? What do I need to do to put myself in a position where I have a career where I'm fulfilled? My home life is fulfilled, whether that's, spouses, partners, kids, dogs, whatever that may be. And, how can I be happy doing what I'm doing, whatever it is I'm spending my time on? And so I know that's not like one of those, answers that probably just rocks your world, but, from day to day, month to month, season to season, you just have to evaluate where you are and make sure things are balanced for where you are in your life.
Kelly, could I just add, first off,
Please.
Pamela, you're an inspiration, and I think it's really incredible what you're able to do, and I think when we look at leadership positions in admission, oftentimes it's so hard to imagine balancing everything that some of these women balance. I personally am a person that is scared to I was telling everybody before we started, I just got a dog. That level of commitment was scary to me. And I'm just catching on to some of these life things that people started a little earlier, which is, great, I guess. But I would also say what I have always been told is that you find a way to do things. And I am finding that really comforting now as I got married about 6 months ago. And I'm sort of finally endeavoring on some of these things that some amazing women took on earlier. So I would say that I have found that I have added things as I've added things that I was sort of initially really scared to add into my life, like buying a house or even this leadership position. I'm just this sort of timid person when it comes to some of these things, but I have found that I can balance them. And I would just encourage our panelists that are out there early in their admission careers, take those opportunities to pursue graduate school, take those opportunities to apply for something outside of your comfort zone. And believe me, you can do much more than you think you can do. And I got a dog in my mid-30s, so that's my proof personally.
Kelly, is there one more second to add to that?
Absolutely, please.
So in addition to the amazing things that we just heard, I was on a panel recently where there was a debate about whether or not work-life balance existed, and I was very confident that it does. I think my fellow panelist was absolutely not. So it's all a matter of perspective is where we land on that particular topic. I also think that as women in leadership, it comes up too often about work-life balance, if I'm honest. And so it feels like we have to make choices about things that aren't necessarily addressed to our male counterparts who may be in very similar situations, but it's not, who's helping them do the things that they need to get done. And my comments about this are, for as difficult as it is, you have to ask for help. I don't think anything gets done without that. I know that all of us are on here on the panel or as attendees because we have been successful at the work that we do as an entry-level staff member, as a senior level staff member, but we have to ask for help. I will tell you a story. When I first took on this job at Rollins, knowing how demanding our work in admission is, I told my VP, I said, listen, I will be available whenever, however. I said, but my kid plays soccer and I'm expecting that she will continue playing, and that whenever those games come, I will be at those games. And if that means I have to leave early and check email later or whatever the case may be, I just want to put that out to you that that's a priority. Now, as all that was said, my kid didn't even play soccer when we moved here, so there was that. But point being that I kind of laid out in the very beginning what things were important to me. Don't get that confused with, this job not being a priority, that I'm not going to show up in areas where I'm needed or work late. As you mentioned, Pam, right? I will do the things that are necessary to get the job done, but I also need to make sure that I'm carving out time for the things that I need. Self-care in light of COVID have been a game changer and absolutely necessary. And so, I don't know, here in Florida, to my friends, we call it the Wild Wild West because we're doing all kinds of weird things here in COVID. So take that with a grain of salt. But doing the things that matter, that provide you with that sense of purpose just for yourself, because if we're not taking care of ourselves as individuals, to be quite honest, nobody else is either. And so that work-life balance, that blend starts with you. And so if you can't find the things that bring you pleasure, whether it's reading a book, painting your nails, going on a walk, getting a puppy, having a kid, right? Getting married, whatever it is that is on your list of things to do, that it should be achievable. And when it doesn't seem like it's possible, that's actually not true, right? We're not really investing every minute of the day to do the things that we want to do. And we should definitely make that a priority.
And I'm sorry, Kelly, but
Go
Diane,
ahead.
don't let that work-life balance thing try to make you feel insignificant or inferior, because you are exactly right. Men don't get that question, okay? So don't let someone use that work-life balance to make you feel like you're less than a woman if you don't do this, or if your priorities aren't in the right place, or if you are 100% committed to your career and you want to put off the family for a little bit longer. Don't let that phrase and that pursuit of work-life balance make you feel like your decisions aren't right for you.
I've just got to say, wow, this is an amazing panel. I don't know how you guys did this. This is just amazing. And I just, the whole thing is that you can't compare your situation to anybody else's either. The kind of the life balance thing that works for someone else may not work for you. So you have to figure out how it works for you. I had someone ask me one time, "Hey, what do you do for fun?" I said, "Well, I hang out with kids." They're like, that's not fun. And I was like, "Oh, that's not fun?" And I was thinking, "Oh, wait a minute, that brings me joy. Just hanging out with kids brings me joy. So why is that not something that brings me, joy and balance?" So the idea that whatever it is for you, like all the ladies have said here and the leaders have said here, whatever it is that works for you, that's what works for you. And you're right, men aren't asked this question. We are, but men aren't asked this question. And I say we be prepared to just say whatever it is that we want, and put it out there and put it at the forefront. So yeah, and don't compare ourselves to other people. Figure out what it is that we want to do as individuals, and then let that be what it is that drives us.
Wow, I couldn't agree more. You all are invigorating, and I really appreciate this conversation. It's wonderful. So, Zaire, you mentioned something that kind of brought this forward. Any tips on addressing the heightened, what's being referred to as the imposter syndrome out there that has come out of a result of this COVID-19 in your work life? Who wants to take that? Yep, thank you.
Yeah. Wow. When I think about, and many of us have talked about a very similar journey, right? We didn't envision that this is where we would be at this point in time in our professional careers. And there is this cloud of expectation that we should be or appear like or present, fill in the blank. And it wasn't until I got to a place like Rollins where, after being a professional for so long, that it was like, this is me, right? And like it or leave it. And I think there's some of my colleagues on the webinar, so you guys can tell me about this later, how you feel. But I think I'm a likable person, and not that matters for anything as much as being authentic to myself. And so in COVID, what's been the most helpful, and I know we don't always talk about the positives of COVID-19, but I think just being able to take a step back and recognize, right, the humanity that we continue to talk about. Yeah, we know what the cycles of our work bring. We know the demand that's here. But if we don't take a moment and pause with whatever else is happening around us, then it makes the work insignificant. And we all know that we're doing this because of the value of the work that it brings to us and to the students and families that we impact on a day-to-day basis. And so I think that COVID-19 has allowed for this like mask off moment where, yeah, we put up a lot of appearances to make sure that we can do and be whomever, we need to be, to the president of our institution or to the principal of your high school or to whoever's writing the grant, right, for Gear Up. but there's just a moment where we have to be vulnerable. And I think and amongst women, I can say that, and it's a very hard thing to think, like, yeah, we're not going to be vulnerable in the workplace. But in order to be effective and true to ourselves, we just have to have more mask off moments. And COVID has provided, right, work from home, right, when you don't look dressed up, but from the waist up, you look somewhat presentable. And that's okay, right, because I'm still getting the work done, and or coming into the office, or not having to be here all day, or whatever. It just has afforded some realization that the work is necessary, the work is important, and we can get it done, but we can be creative about how we do that. And I say those things like it's super easy, and that's not the case at all. But COVID-19, in a good way, right, exposing that imposter syndrome has been helpful to be able to recenter like what is important. And in some cases, making me, and I know others, reevaluate, is this how you want to spend the next few years of your professional career? And for some, you have to say no. And for others are like, yeah, I want to keep pushing. And so how can we support you in the next step? So yeah, I don't even know that I really answered the question, but I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Can I add something? Zaire, first off, that was really helpful, and very much, I think, what we're all experiencing during COVID. For me, also, I think combating imposter syndrome has to do with like reaching out to others that I really trust, who are colleagues at other institutions, and sort of talking about some of the fears. And it's helpful if these people know you in a work context. Certainly you can do this with your friends and family, but I also rely on people that I've worked with in the past and say, like, this is something that I'm really struggling with right now. Or I don't feel like I can do this. And so I find that like I get a lot of strength from how those close to me sort of see me and help me process things. And I will also say, like, COVID has made it so much more important, I think, also to have those conversations with both your supervisor, but, you know, bringing up those fears and just verbalizing them is something that just really, really helps me. So putting them out there in the daylight, and like, then, you know, they sort of shrink. They're not as scary to me anymore.
And Aimee, I think you just kind of transitions us to another question that's been asked is, what tips do you have on balancing empathy and authority? I mean, that empathy, we've somewhat been confronted with that even more so, still having that balancing act. Does anybody have any tips that they can share with us? Tonya?
Yeah, you know, that's a really interesting question that you pose. You know, it also goes back to how we lead. I think I've got this kind of pedagogy of care mixed with what I call gradual release of authenticity and accountability, all mixed together. All right. So what does that mean? The people with whom I work, I try to care for them, and I think they try to care for me, and I try to meet them where they are. So that is a level of empathy that I have for them as I try to grow them into where they want to go. At the same time, we set our targets and our goals for accountability for each other at the same time. You know, so it's this piece of empathy mixed with we still are accountable to each other for our work. So I'd have to say, like, I've got this pedagogy of care going where I'm going to grow you. And if you're with me, you're going to leave me a lot better than you entered, because we're going to go on this journey together, right? So everybody's going to enter and leave better than when we first came in. But at the same time, we can do that through accountability for each other. One short 3-sentence story. I had a colleague that I worked with who was really producing work that was good. And then there was a slump, right, within our world of admissions and college access. And I was trying to figure out what the slump was. Well, the slump, and the person didn't make it visible, was that this person needed access to resources, right? And so through a pedagogy of care, we got an idea of what this person needed in order for him or her to be able to function again. When that was given, then that person could then become whole, right? It's that idea of, even as a woman, even as just a good leader, It's realizing what the people with whom you work need. How can we help them get what they need in order for them to function? And how do we do that? And then how are we accountable to each other? Because we're all interconnected in meeting our goals. So I think that for me, that is the empathy as well as the accountability that we have to have together. Growing people and growing together is kind of my philosophy, Kelly.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that?
Yeah, Tonya, that was good about the accountability and just having, kind of the goals set out to say, like, this is what we're striving towards. And, our profession obviously is so team oriented. Campus visits have to be working and recruitment has to be working, or in your case, if we're planning an ACT prep, we've got to have logistics in place. We've got to know who's invited. And, if you're supposed to be working on a flyer, you need to be getting that flyer out. And so just having that understanding that we're all working towards some goal and we all have a role to play, I think also allows people to then be vulnerable and to say, well, I know I'm accountable for this, but I don't have the resources, or this is the challenge. And so you never want to create an environment where people don't feel like they can come to you. And so Tonya, because you care about your staff, they probably feel like they can come to you if there's something, blocking their productivity, and they can say, hey, I know I'm a valuable part of this team. I know I have this task, but here are the things that are really challenging me right now. And they have that confidence in you that you can help them work through that because you've already shown that you can help them grow. And so, yeah, we need to have authority and make sure things get done and checked off the list. But, to Tonya's point, I think she said it so well, is that, we still have to show that care and we have to have kind of that two-way communication with our team.
We have a question from the crowd. What advice do you have as you transition from being a peer to a supervisor leader in regards to working with these colleagues now? Any tips? Aimee? Anything you want to share?
I'm mulling it over. I did that when I was at Agnes Scott, and it was challenging. I think I feel really lucky because I think the team that was in place gave me a lot of grace, but it was really challenging, especially with people that were sort of on the same sort of senior admission, same place that I was. I think that just having I think meetings personally, connecting with people one-on-one and sharing things is really important to me. So making sure that was very much in place through that transition, and trying to have open communication, and maybe allowing for some awkward conversations or awkward moments to come out of that was really important in those more private spaces. But it's hard. But it's not always, it's hard for a while, and then eventually you're in your role long enough that it really gets better.
I would also offer, in that transition, where previous leadership had been used to doing business as usual, there was an opportunity to be able to discuss at that decision-making table skill sets that folks brought to the team. And so, initially there's this, well, you bring in a new, cohort of admission professionals. And so this is just how you assign the work. And as a peer, right, you know who has what strengths. And so you're like, okay, well, we know we have to accomplish this, but this is what you're going to do based on your skill set. And then, right, I'll take my role. And so I think being able to elevate that in that transition was helpful. But I think the other thing too, what you learn pretty quickly is how you don't want to lead. And I think it was mentioned a couple of times, right? Being a micromanager is not ideal. And I don't know anybody who's going to be raise their hand, I'm a certifiable micromanager. However, in trying to meet people where they are, establish how do you want to, right, receive information. If we're talking about expectations, we know that this is a goal and this is when we need to complete it. How are we going to track this progress, right? Is this a weekly meeting? Is this a bi-weekly meeting? Is this a monthly meeting? Are you offering me a written report, or is this a verbal exchange during a conversation? And so I think as long as there's a continual evolution of understanding, then then I think you adapt to whatever the person needs versus having to rule with this one type of leadership style, because that just doesn't work for anybody. And at the moment where you start feeling inauthentic to the work that you're doing, then you too have to, you know, and Tonya mentioned this, do some self-reflection on how you lead, because there are times, right, that as from peer to leader that you do change, but not to the point in which you're not, that you can't even recognize who you are as a professional.
Thank you. Thank you. With the 5 minutes that we have remaining, one final question that I'm going to ask each one of you to share. What organizations outside of admissions, college access, or your immediate vicinity would you recommend joining? And think about also, are there leadership organizations or personal development organizations that associations that you would recommend? So let's go, we'll go back to alphabetical order. I have to go back to Pamela.
Well, SACAC, if you're not a SACAC member, go ahead and get that done. I will say privileged to be a member of a sorority. And so a lot of, you know, kind of the non-related work-related things that I do socially and community service related is, you know, through that organization. So I kind of have that kind of built-in outlet. But I definitely, you know, would encourage folks to find a cause, find a nonprofit somewhere, you know, local that you can give time to. I feel like we've kind of gone away from that, you know, like I feel like when my mom, you know, when I was younger, my mom had like her little, you know, groups, and she was on the board of this, and they, you know, planned different events and fundraisers and things. And you knew on Saturdays is where she was, you know, off doing that. And so, you know, you can obviously get leadership opportunities through those things, socialization opportunities. I just think it's important to have an outlet that's not work related, where you still have an opportunity to build skills that may help you progress later on. And it not being work related will help you kind of separate that and make it not seem so much like a chore or a job. But if it's something that you're passionate about and that you're interested in, but then it also has the added benefit of giving you skills or giving you that confidence to translate that into your professional life, then that's definitely a bonus.
No, Aimee, you're first. Sorry, we're out of order. My bad.
It's okay. I guess I'm going to go the personal development route, and I would encourage you to look at what, if you're at an institution, and I realize this is really different depending on where you are, but I only recently realized that Agnes Scott has an employee assistance program that has like all sorts of great resources and benefits to sort of help you not only as an employee, though there are some great things in there, but also just through your life in managing the many curves that life throws your way. Especially during COVID, I have found this helpful in dealing with life things. Also, Agnes Scott recently started some sort of contract with Academic Impressions that gives us access to a lot of great sort of, you know, professional development opportunities that then don't cost the college additional money outside of that contract. So I would sort of peek around and see what you might have access to, and make sure you're sort of understanding what your institutions might give you access to through different affiliations.
So I'll offer, I too, like Pam, am in a sorority, and being financial is important to stay active, but that's a whole nother conversation for another topic anyway. But staying connected that way is certainly important. Your alumni association for the institutions for which you have attended, depending on if there are chapters within your area, are certainly a way to connect with those alum that you didn't know while you were in college and meet others and do service. When I lived in North Carolina, the Junior Women's Club was a part of an organization that I decided to join, but that connection came through folks that I went to church with. And so the connections upon connections. The other piece here, as a Florida resident with my 2 girls, I have one in elementary school, I decided, actually for both, to be a part of the PTA. And because of our work schedule, kind of more pre-COVID, where we were traveling a lot more and just not present as often, that I wanted to be connected in a purposeful way. And so for my older one who's in high school, just kind of being present and attending PTA meetings to find out, right, the real deal and what's going on in the school. And then for my little one, thinking that I had enough time to serve in a leadership role. I don't know what I was thinking, but that's what I'm doing in my spare time. And so I think just being able to connect with the community purposefully, but doing it with what's aligned with you and what you want to accomplish, and trying something new. I cannot tell you, being in Central Florida and being down the street from the happiest place on earth, it doesn't hurt when you find people who like to do theme parks. And so that's just like a super casual, obviously a huge investment, but a super casual way to engage and meet with folks. So I would offer those.
And so in the true spirit of what we're doing, shout out to the D9. I also am in a wonderful organization. But I want to talk, I agree with all of the leaders here, and I just want to add another spin. It's not an organization, but I find mentors. I find people who are in the field that I connect with that seem to invest in me and I in them. And I find mentors. And so with mentors, we might read the same book. It could be related to work or not, or we talk about different organizations and what we learned at different places. But finding a mentor has been one way professionally, which has been really helpful to me. I enjoy hanging out with my mentor. My mentor that I had a couple of years ago, we've been through thick and thin together, and shout out to Dr. Collins. I also took her to the doctor when she received some bad news, and now she's recovered. But this thing that mentoring works in all spaces, not just work, right? But it can work in lots of different areas: personal growth, leadership development. And then if you're and a mentor will tell you, you know what, I thought that was pretty good when you said it, but I don't think that turned out so well. So you might want to rethink that thing, So I'm going to go the route of mentorship, it doesn't matter how you find it. It can be in your church circle, your sister circle, could be your work circle, could be your workout circle, but just finding people who invest in you in different ways and you invest in them. I have found that very helpful as a leader to have that as I have grown, Kelly, finding that mentor.
Well, I want to thank everyone for their time this morning. We are all inspired, motivated. People had us crying. I mean, the chat was just going crazy. So we have some questions that were unable to be touched upon during our time today, and we're going to reach out to the panelists and follow up with those. If you're comfortable, can I assume that you guys are also okay with answering questions via email from our guests if they have specific questions for you all? We also wanted to shout out, of course, our next webinar is going to be talking about the SACAC conference, which we've dropped some links in the chat to kind of get registered for those things. But to conclude, thank you so much for your time, your kind words, your motivation. We are all excited to kind of continue this work and go into Friday and Thursday, of course, motivated, happy, and ready to go. So thank you guys. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you all.